The gavel struck the wooden bench, and the sound carved through the courtroom like a blade slicing open 13 years of silence. My name is Eleanor Vance, 67 years old, a grandmother who has carried the weight of someone else's motherhood for far too long. As the echo lingered, my wrinkled fingers tightened around a yellow envelope, the same envelope I had guarded like a wound that refused to close. Across from me sat my daughter, Valerie, her posture stiff inside a polished suit, her eyes carrying a rage I feared was born long before this moment. She stared at me as though I were the criminal, as though raising her abandoned children had been a crime worthy of chains. Beside her, attorney Mark Sullivan flipped through documents with confidence sharpened like a blade. And behind me, my 3 grandchildren, Arthur, Emily, and Andrea, watched, wide-eyed, trapped between the past and a trial they never asked for. When Valerie spoke, her accusations sliced through the air. "Your Honor, my mother kept my children for 13 years without my consent. This is parental kidnapping." The word kidnapping crashed against my chest with a cruel weight. The audience murmured, choosing sides they did not understand. Judge Mason, with tired eyes that had seen too many broken families, turned to me. "Mrs. Vance, what do you have to say to these accusations?" My breath trembled, not with fear, but with the heaviness of truth. I lifted the yellow envelope slightly, feeling the room lean toward me like witnesses drawn to a secret. "Your Honor," I said, voice steadying, "I did not kidnap anyone. I raised the children my daughter left at my doorstep." The courtroom stilled, even the lights hummed quieter. I began to tell the story, the truth I had lived one sacrifice at a time. Valerie had appeared 13 years ago on a cold October afternoon, soaked in rain and desperation, thrusting her 3 children into my arms. Arthur, only 7, shivered beneath a thin shirt. Emily, 5, had dried food caked on her cheek, and little Andrea, barely 3, wore a diaper long overdue for changing. She told me, "Just for a few weeks, Mom, I need to sort my life." But within minutes of leaving, she was gone in a taxi, disappearing into a life that did not have space for her children. I showed the court the photographs, proof of the state they had arrived in. When the judge's face hardened, Valerie hid behind her hands. The whispering behind me grew louder. Those first nights flooded back in painful clarity. Arthur asking when his mother was coming back. Emily falling silent for weeks. Andrea coughing through nights without sleep. I told the judge how I enrolled them in school, how I worked weekends scrubbing floors to buy them shoes without holes, how I sold my jewelry to pay medical bills, how I learned to become everything they needed: mother, father, nurse, teacher, protector. I told him how I tried to find Valerie, how she had moved, left no address, no phone, no sign of wanting them back. And then I revealed the letters. The courtroom leaned forward when I opened the envelope. Inside were handwritten letters, Valerie's own words, letters where she confessed she had moved away with a new man, Javier, who did not want immediate family responsibilities. Letters where she admitted she was pregnant and had chosen a new life that excluded her children. Letters offering me $500 if I would stop interfering and let her start over cleanly. And then the final letter, the one that changed every expression in the room, a voluntary renunciation of parental rights, written by Valerie, signed, dated, declaring she could not and would not return for her children. Gasps rose around us. Valerie shook her head violently, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I was sick. I didn't know what I was doing." But the judge had already read the medical records, records showing she had been declared stable months before writing that renunciation. The truth tightened around the room like a noose of her own making. I felt my grandchildren leaning forward behind me, their bodies tense, their breaths uneven, as if hearing their mother's confession for the first time. Then I revealed the part that made Valerie flinch hardest. "Your Honor," I said, gripping the envelope, "for 13 years my daughter never called, until 2 months ago. She had resurfaced not out of love, but because my late brother had left an inheritance, $50,000 for each child, money accessible only under the custody of a legal guardian, me. And when I told her the inheritance was protected, she threatened me. Text messages showed her words clearly. 'Give me custody or I'll accuse you of kidnapping.' The judge read those messages in silence, his eyes darkening with each line. By the time Arthur, Emily, and Andrea stood to speak, the room was still as stone. Arthur said softly that I was the only mother he ever knew. Emily said she remembered the neglect. Andrea said she remembered the hunger. And together they said what I never imagined I would hear. Our mother is Eleanor. I felt my breath catch. I felt the years of sacrifice settle gently beside me. I felt the truth finally breathe. But just as I thought the story was finished, the judge leaned forward and asked me one last question. "Mrs. Vance, is there anything else the court should know before I make my ruling?" And my fingers tightened around the envelope, because there was something else, something the children didn't know, something that would change everything. And I was finally ready to reveal it.
The courtroom seemed to shrink as I held the envelope, its worn edges trembling in my fingers. Arthur, Emily, and Andrea leaned forward instinctively, sensing the weight of the moment even before the truth surfaced. Judge Mason watched me with a careful, steady gaze, the kind reserved for confessions that could shift the entire balance of a case. Behind me, the air thickened with the murmurs of strangers who had become witnesses to the unraveling of a family's buried history. And across from me, Valerie sat pale and motionless, like a woman bracing for an earthquake she once caused but never imagined surviving. "Your Honor," I began softly, "before I reveal what's left in this envelope, I respectfully ask that the court allow my grandchildren to speak." A stir ran through the room. The judge nodded after a brief pause. "Very well. Their voices matter here." Arthur rose first, tall now, steady, but I still saw the 7-year-old boy who clung to me that rainy afternoon. He stepped to the stand with a heaviness in his expression that should never belong to someone his age. "Yes, I remember my mother," he glanced at Valerie, "but I also remember being hungry. I remember confusion. I remember Grandma Eleanor buying groceries while we hid behind her legs." His voice didn't crack. It strengthened. "For 13 years, she never failed us, not once. She became our mother because she showed up every day." When he looked at me with warmth in his eyes, tears burned behind mine. And then he said the sentence that silenced even the judge. "You left us, and Grandma picked us up from the ground." His voice steadied. "I want to stay where I'm loved." Their words struck harder than any legal argument. Valerie's body sagged as if each syllable chipped away at the lie she'd told herself for 13 years. When they returned to their seats, the judge looked at me again. "Mrs. Vance, you may proceed." My fingers found the last hidden fold inside the yellow envelope, a single sheet, creased from time, stained faintly from tears I never admitted shedding. I unfolded it slowly, revealing a document I had kept secret for over a decade. "Your Honor," I whispered, "this is a voluntary renunciation of parental rights, written and signed by my daughter." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge stood slightly straighter. "Miss Vance, Is this your handwriting? Valerie's lips trembled. I don't remember writing it. I was sick. Medical records show otherwise, the judge interrupted gravely. You were declared mentally stable months before this date. My heart ached as Valerie crumbled into sobs, but the truth was a blade that had waited too long to be drawn. I continued. I discovered this document among the things she left behind. I kept it, not to use against her, but because I hoped it would never need to be used. A painful silence fell over the room, a silence filled with realizations, years of them. The judge turned and asked, Miss Vance, do you deny signing this? Her breath hitched. I don't deny it. The judge exhaled slowly, reading the renunciation line by line, as though absorbing the weight of abandonment etched into every word. Then I reached for one final envelope, a fresh one I had never opened until recently. Your Honor, I said, there is something else the court deserves to know, something that explains why my daughter returned after 13 years of silence. My grandchildren leaned in, anxiety darkening their eyes like a storm forming. This, I whispered, is about the inheritance. Faces shifted. The judge's expression sharpened. Valerie froze. My brother, Arthur Vance, left each child $50,000, money they can only claim under a guardian's legal protection. I had already begun preparing their trust accounts. The courtroom held its breath. And 2 months ago, the same week she hired an attorney, my daughter learned about the inheritance. A harsh whisper spread through the room like wildfire. But I wasn't done. In this envelope are text messages, messages where my daughter threatened to accuse me of kidnapping unless I gave her custody. Messages where she offered to split the inheritance if I cooperated. Messages where she warned she would destroy me in court if I refused. The words ignited shock across every face, including her lawyers. Valerie sobbed, covering her face with trembling hands. The judge looked at me, then at her, then at the documents. Mrs. Vance, he asked quietly, is there anything else you wish to present to this court? I lifted my eyes to him. Yes, I said softly, because the envelope wasn't empty. Not yet. There was still one secret left, the deepest one, the one even the children didn't know, the one that would change everything. And now, it was time. The courtroom felt suspended in a breath that refused to release. Even the walls seemed to lean closer as I held the envelope to my chest, the final secret inside it pressing against my ribs like a heartbeat made of truth. Arthur, Emily, and Andrea sat frozen behind me, their hands clasped, their faces pale, their eyes begging for answers they didn't yet know they needed. Valerie, my daughter, stared at me as if bracing for a sentence that had nothing to do with the law and everything to do with the ghosts of her own choices. And Judge Theodore Mason, a man who had presided over hundreds of cases, now watched me with an intensity that suggested even he understood something monumental was about to break open. Mrs. Vance, his voice softened, though firm beneath the weight of the moment, what is this final document you say will change everything? My fingers slid inside the envelope, brushing the folded paper that had lived hidden for years, a paper I had hoped never to reveal, a truth I prayed my grandchildren would never have to confront. But life has a way of choosing its own timing, and today, the truth demanded light. This, I whispered, unfolding the sheet slowly, is the missing piece of the story, the piece that explains why my daughter left, why she never returned, and why she is here today. The judge leaned forward, the audience leaned in, even the air felt still. I turned to face my grandchildren, my beautiful, brave children, and their eyes searched mine with trembling trust. "My loves," I breathed, "I never wanted you to learn this in a courtroom." Valerie covered her mouth, shaking her head violently. "Mom, please don't." But the time for silence had long passed. "This document," I said, lifting it gently, "is a written confession about the father of the children." Gasps erupted like a wave across the room. Confusion washed over Arthur's face. Emily's lips parted as if forming a question she feared asking. Andrea's fingers gripped the wooden bench so tightly her knuckles turned white. The judge motioned for calm. "Mrs. Vance, please read the document." I nodded and lowered my gaze to the faded ink, Valerie's handwriting, uneven, emotional, unmistakable. "In this letter," I began shakily, "my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them." The room went dead silent. "Because he never knew they existed." A collective gasp swelled. "He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know." Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. "In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed." A collective gasp swelled. "He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know." Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. "In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed." A collective gasp swelled. "He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know." Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. "In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed." A collective gasp swelled. "He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know." Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. "In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed." A collective gasp swelled. "He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know." Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. "In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed." A collective gasp swelled. "He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know." Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. "In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed." A collective gasp swelled. "He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know." Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed. A collective gasp swelled. He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know. Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed. A collective gasp swelled. He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know. Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed. A collective gasp swelled. He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know. Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed. A collective gasp swelled. He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know. Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed. A collective gasp swelled. He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know. Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed. A collective gasp swelled. He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know. Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew they existed. A collective gasp swelled. He didn't leave. He wasn't responsible. He wasn't negligent. He simply did not know. Arthur blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. Emily clutched Andrea's hand. Valerie's sobs broke into sharp, panicked breaths. I continued reading aloud. In this letter, my daughter revealed that the father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea did not abandon them because he never knew.
The courtroom felt colder now, as if the truth itself had drawn the warmth out of the air. The revelation about the children's father hung like a storm cloud over everyone's heads. Arthur, Emily, and Andrea sat frozen, their expressions fractured into disbelief, hurt, and something deeper, a quiet mourning for a truth stolen from them before they were old enough to understand they even had one. But the letter wasn't finished, not even close. Judge Mason cleared his throat, steady but shaken. Mrs. Vance, you implied there is more written in that confession. I looked down at the paper, the ink faded, the handwriting trembling, the edges worn by years of hiding. Yes, Your Honor, I whispered. There is one last truth my daughter wrote, but it is the hardest one. I could feel Valerie's panic from across the courtroom. She gripped the table as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. "Mom, please, don't say it," she begged, voice shredded by fear. Her desperation confirmed what everyone already suspected. Whatever was coming next was devastating. I inhaled shakily. Then I read. "Mom, I am afraid the children's father might try to come back. If he finds out they exist, he may try to take them. That is why I had to disappear. That is why I cannot allow anyone to know the truth. Because the truth is, I never told him they were his." Whispers burst through the audience like cracks in glass. But then came the line that made Arthur, Emily, and Andrea go completely still. I told him the pregnancy wasn't his. The silence was suffocating. I told him, I read, voice trembling, that the children belonged to another man, a man who never existed, a lie I created because I didn't want him to force me into motherhood before I was ready. A stunned breath escaped Arthur. Emily pressed a hand over her mouth. Andrea whispered, "She lied to him and to us." But the confession wasn't over. And if he ever finds out, if he ever learns the truth, he might come back and fight for them. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Vance, is the father aware of the truth now?" I swallowed hard. "No, Your Honor. I never responded to his letters. I never confirmed anything. I didn't want to uproot the children's lives until I knew the full truth myself." "What truth?" the judge pressed. I closed my eyes, because this next part was the real devastation. When I opened the letter again, my hands trembled so violently the paper rustled like dry leaves. "Mom, there is something else." My voice shook. "The children's father doesn't know he's dying." The courtroom exploded with gasps. "He has terminal heart failure. Doctors gave him 5 years, maybe less." I paused, the words catching in my throat. "If he ever learns he has children, he might fight to see them before he dies." A heaviness swept through the courtroom, as if grief itself had entered the room. Arthur's jaw clenched, tears slipping down his face. He's dying, and he doesn't know about us?" Emily sobbed, quiet, broken. Andrea whispered, "He's dying because of her lie." Valerie finally broke. She fell to her knees right there in the courtroom, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't know. I didn't know he was sick back then. I didn't—" But her voice cracked under the weight of her own choices. The judge held up a hand. "Mrs. Vance, was this verified?" I nodded weakly. "Yes, Your Honor. The private investigator found medical documentation. He is, in fact, very ill, but he still does not know the truth about his children." A sharp breath rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "This means the children have a biological father who never abandoned them, who has been searching for them, and who may not have long to live." My grandchildren's tears fell silently now, grief for a man they had never met, but were connected by blood, by fate, by years of stolen truth. But the judge wasn't done. "Mrs. Vance, does the father know where Valerie is now?" I froze, because that was the final piece of the storm. Slowly, painfully, I answered,
No, Your Honor, but the investigator's report says he is still searching, actively, and my heart slammed in my chest. He's close to finding her. A stunned silence flooded the room. Arthur whispered, "So he's coming here?" Emily grabbed his hand. Andrea shook her head in disbelief. Valerie stared at me with wild, terrified eyes. "Mom, what have you done?" Tension crackled like electricity. Truth, grief, fear, justice, all colliding at once. And then the judge spoke, voice steady but heavy. "Mrs. Vance, this changes the legal framework of this entire case." I felt the floor tilt. Valerie gasped. My grandchildren held each other tightly. Because now, custody wasn't the only question. Now, another parent might enter the story. A dying father, searching relentlessly, running out of time, and he had no idea his children were sitting right here in this courtroom. But fate was not finished, because the judge looked at me and asked, "Mrs. Vance, does the father know that all 3 of his children live in this state?" My breath caught, because the truth was, he did. He knew far more than I had realized, and he was already closer than any of us expected. And what came next would shake the courtroom to its core.
For a moment, the courtroom became impossibly still, as if every sound, every heartbeat, every whisper had been suspended in midair. Judge Mason's question echoed through the silence like a warning bell. "Mrs. Vance, does the father know that all 3 children live in this state?" My breath trembled, because the truth was no longer avoidable, no longer something I could bury beneath good intentions, no longer a secret hidden for protection. I lifted my eyes slowly, and the entire room leaned toward me like a single living creature. "Yes, Your Honor," I whispered. "He knows." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The tension thickened into something sharp enough to cut skin. Arthur stiffened. Emily squeezed his arm. Andrea's eyes went wide, her lips trembling as she whispered, "He knows about us?" But the truth was harsher. "Yes," I continued softly, "the private investigator discovered that he tracked the children to this state a year ago. He contacted several agencies, trying to locate Valerie. He believed she might still have the children with her." A wave of confusion rolled through the courtroom. "Does he know who you are?" the judge pressed. And that was the moment the ground shifted beneath all of us. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my next words settle like stones in my chest. "He knows my name. He knows the name Eleanor Vance, and he has been trying to find me." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Irreversible. Valerie covered her mouth with both hands, her breath exploding into a panicked sob. "Oh, God, Mom, what have you done?" But the judge lifted a hand sharply. "Mrs. Valerie Vance, you will remain silent." Then he turned back to me, not with anger, but with something even more unsettling. Urgency. "Mrs. Vance, when you say he has been trying to find you, how close is he to locating the children?" My heartbeat thudded in my throat. "The investigator believes," I swallowed hard, "he is already in this state." Another gasp erupted. Someone in the gallery knocked over a water bottle. Even the court clerk sat frozen. "He arrived 2 months ago, around the same time Valerie appeared. He has been asking about the children in nearby counties, trying to confirm their identities." The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof of this?" "Yes, Your Honor." I handed over a second folder, one I hadn't planned to open today, one that contained the truth I had hoped would never surface in front of my grandchildren.
Judge Mason flipped through the pages slowly. Then his expression changed. "Mrs. Vance," he said in a low voice, "the investigator's report says the father has contacted the district clerk's office, the school board, the DMV, and—" He stopped abruptly. His eyes shot up at mine. "He attempted to file a petition to meet the children 3 weeks ago." Shock ripped through the room like lightning. "What?" Arthur blurted. Emily gasped. Andrea clutched her chest. Valerie shook her head violently. "No, no, he can't. He can't come back now, not after all these years." But the judge's voice cut through her panic. "He never left Mrs. Vance. He never abandoned them. He never even knew they were alive." Then he turned to my grandchildren. "Children, there's something you need to understand. Your biological father is not only alive, not only looking for you, but legally he has the right to petition for contact." The words detonated inside their hearts. Arthur stepped backwards, almost stumbling. Emily burst into tears. Andrea whispered, "He wants to meet us, but we don't even know him." And then a knock on the courtroom door. Sharp, hard, urgent. The bailiff walked quickly toward the judge and bent to whisper something into his ear. The judge's eyes widened, then narrowed, then hardened. He looked at me, then at Valerie, then at my grandchildren. "Mrs. Vance, it appears that the private investigator's timeline was correct." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I whispered. The judge stood. "Mrs. Vance, your grandchildren's biological father is here." Valerie screamed, tore through the courtroom. Arthur's breath stopped. Emily grabbed Andrea. My knees nearly gave out. "He is outside this courtroom," the judge continued, "requesting permission to enter." Chaos erupted. Valerie lunged toward the judge's bench, shouting desperately, "No, don't let him in! Don't let him see them!" Her lawyer tried to restrain her, but she thrashed like a drowning woman. The court deputies moved fast. "Order! Order!" the judge roared, slamming his gavel. My grandchildren stared at the door behind which stood the man whose blood flowed in their veins, the father they never knew, the man who never abandoned them, who had been searching for them for more than a decade, a dying man, a desperate man, and a father who had finally found the truth. Then the metal handle twisted with a slow, deliberate click. A sound so small yet so devastating it split the courtroom in half. Every breath stopped, every heartbeat staggered. Even the hum of the lights seemed to die as all eyes locked on the door that had been nothing more than wood a moment ago, but now held a living past behind it. And then the door opened. A man stepped inside. Not a monster, not a ghost, not the villain Valerie had painted for 13 years, but a man who looked painfully human. Thin, pale, shoulders trembling, a medical bracelet still wrapped around his wrist. His eyes, tired, grief-soaked, hopeful, scanned the courtroom until they landed on the 3 faces he did not yet dare believe were truly his. Arthur, Emily, Andrea. He froze. The courtroom didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. It was Arthur who reacted first, not forward, but backward. A step of shock, confusion, and something deeper, something shaking the ground beneath him. The judge addressed the man carefully. "Sir, state your name." The man swallowed hard. "My name." His voice cracked. He tried again. "My name is Michael Reyes. I'm the biological father of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea." A whisper rippled through the courtroom like wildfire. Valerie screamed, "No, no, you don't have the right! You don't have the right to be here!" Deputies grabbed her before she could lunge forward again. But Michael didn't even look at her. His shaking eyes were locked on his children he didn't know how to approach, children whose entire lives had been lived without him, children whose faces mirrored his own in heartbreaking ways. Then, in a voice so soft it barely carried across the room, he whispered, "My God, you're real." Andrea broke first. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She clung to Emily's arm, trembling. Emily's chin quivered, eyes shining with heartbreak and disbelief. Arthur stared at the man with a mixture of anger and longing so raw it was painful to witness. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Reyes, why are you here?" Michael wiped a tear that escaped down his cheek. "Because I've been looking for them for 13 years. His voice cracked. "And I didn't know they existed." Valerie screamed again. "Stop lying! You left me! You abandoned us!" Michael finally turned toward her, but not with hatred, with exhaustion, with grief, with a truth that had been buried alive. He said quietly, "I begged you. I begged you to let me be part of their lives. You told me." He choked. "You told me you ended the pregnancy. You told me they never existed." The courtroom gasped. Valerie went silent, not from discipline, but because the lie she had lived behind for years was now stripped bare. Michael turned back to the children. "I only found out the truth when my doctor said I might not have much time. I hired someone to help find any family I might have left, and he found you." Andrea sobbed into her hands. Emily whispered through tears, "He's dying." Arthur clenched his fists, torn cleanly between fury and a desperate ache he had never allowed himself to feel. The judge spoke softly. "Mr. Reyes, what do you want today?" Michael's knees buckled slightly. He gripped the bench for support. "I don't want custody. I don't want to take them away from the woman who raised them with love." He looked at me, at Eleanor, with gratitude so deep it broke something inside me. "Ma'am, thank you. Thank you for giving them everything I should have given them." I pressed a hand to my mouth, tears falling freely. Michael continued, chest heaving. "I'm not here to disrupt their lives. I'm not here to drag them into court. I'm not here for money or anything else." His voice dropped into a trembling whisper. I just want to meet them once, just once, before my time runs out." Those words broke every heart in the room. Arthur's breath hitched painfully. Emily covered her mouth, crying harder. Andrea whispered through tears, "He just wants to meet us." Valerie collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably as deputies restrained her. The judge turned to my grandchildren. "You are all old enough to decide for yourselves," he said gently. "Do you wish to speak to him?" The room held its breath. Then, slowly, hesitantly, Arthur stepped forward. His hands shook, his lips trembled, his eyes were glassy with a lifetime of unanswered questions. He stopped several feet away from Michael, the man who gave him life, the man who never got to hear his first word, the man who never knew he existed. Arthur's voice cracked. "Did you really want us?" Michael's entire body shattered into a sob. "More than anything in the world. You were my dream, and I didn't know. I didn't know." Arthur stumbled into a breath that broke him. Emily moved beside him and held his hand. Andrea joined them, her small fingers trembling. Michael dropped to his knees, crying into his palms. "I'm so sorry." For a long, fragile moment, the world softened. No court, no accusations, no inheritance, just 4 souls, connected by blood, separated by lies, reunited by truth. Arthur stepped closer. He didn't hug him, not yet, but he placed a trembling hand on Michael's shoulder, a silent permission. Emily and Andrea approached too, standing close enough for him to feel their presence, the presence of the life he never got to hold. Michael sobbed harder, as though the weight of everything he had lost finally collapsed inside him. The judge finally spoke, voice thick with emotion. "This court declares the guardianship of Eleanor Vance permanent. The restraining order against Valerie Vance remains in full effect, and the father, Mr. Reyes, is granted non-disruptive supervised contact at the discretion of the children and Mrs. Vance." I nodded tearfully. Michael looked at me with trembling gratitude. "Thank you for giving them a life," he whispered. I took his hand gently. "They deserved it." As the courtroom emptied, my grandchildren stood beside Michael, not as strangers, not yet as family, but something in between, something fragile, something hopeful. And as we stepped out into the hallway together, Arthur whispered, "Maybe we can talk, just talk, see where it goes." And Michael broke into tears again, the joyful kind. Sometimes justice isn't punishment. Sometimes justice is truth, painful, cleansing, necessary. Sometimes justice is 3 children learning that they were never unwanted, never abandoned, never forgotten. And sometimes love arrives late, but still arrives.